September 12th, 1897. The northwest frontier, what is today Pakistan, but was then the furthest, most restless edge of British India, a landscape of jagged mountains and ancient dust that had been swallowing armies whole for centuries, long before the British ever arrived and long after they would leave. Somewhere on a ridge between two larger forts, Lockhart and Gulistan, sat a small signal post called Saragari. Its entire purpose was unglamorous and technical. It housed a heliograph, a mirror-based device that caught sunlight and flashed coded messages between the two forts when direct communication was impossible. The post had no guns worth mentioning, no strategic depth, no value on its own. It was a link in a chain, a dot on a map, the kind of place that appears in military reports only when something goes wrong. That morning, 21 men of the 36th Sikh Regiment of the British Indian Army were stationed there. Coming toward them across the hills, filling the valleys and the ridgelines, were somewhere between 10,000 and 14,000 Orakzai and Afridi tribesmen, part of a massive coordinated uprising that had been building along the frontier for months, fueled by anger at British expansion and unified under tribal leaders who understood correctly that if they could take these forts, they could crack open the entire frontier. Their plan was logical and clean: surround Fort Rulistan, cut its communication link by silencing Saragari, and starve the isolated garrisons into submission one by one. Before the attack started, they sent men forward to offer the garrison a way out. Surrender now, walk away with your lives, because what is coming over those hills is something that 21 men cannot survive, and everyone here knows it. It was not a taunt, it was a practical offer, the kind that military commanders make when they would rather not spend lives on something unnecessary. By every rational measure, accepting it was the only thing that made sense. The soldiers refused. Their signalman, a man named Gurmukh Singh, was already at the heliograph, already relaying everything in real time to the officers at Fort Lockhart, who sat miles away, reading the flashed signals and understanding with growing horror that they could do nothing. The terrain made relief impossible before it was too late, and all they could do was watch, message by message, as the situation unfolded. The attack that followed lasted approximately 7 hours, and the reason it lasted that long, rather than the 30 minutes pure arithmetic would suggest, comes down to something that military planners always understand in theory and always seem surprised by in practice. Numbers mean less than terrain. Saragari sat on elevated ground. The approaches were narrow and exposed. The men inside the post were not raw recruits handed rifles the week before. They were professional soldiers from a martial tradition that had been producing some of the finest infantry in Asia for generations. Men who had trained for exactly this kind of fighting, and who came from a culture in which dying in battle was not a tragedy to be mourned, but an honor to be sought, the highest expression of what a warrior's life was supposed to mean. So when the first waves came uphill across open ground toward men who knew exactly where to aim and had the elevation advantage, the cost was enormous. The tribesmen had numbers and they had firearms, but they had to expose themselves completely on every approach, and the 21 men on the wall made them pay for every meter. Estimates of the tribesmen's losses vary depending on the source, but the numbers that appear most consistently suggest several hundred killed in the attempt to breach the post, a staggering toll for what should have been a quick overrun of a minor position. Eventually, after hours of failed frontal assaults, they found a different method. They began undermining a section of the outer wall, working at the foundation until the mud brick structure gave way and collapsed inward, and through that gap the tribesmen finally poured into the post. The 21 soldiers fell back from the wall and into the building itself, and what followed was the kind of fighting that leaves almost no record because almost no one survives to write it. Room by room, doorway by doorway, each space becoming its own contained last stand until there was no space left to fall back to. Through all of it, Gurmukh Singh stayed at the heliograph, kept signaling, kept the officers at Lockhart informed of every development as the post was overrun around him. There is something almost unbearable about imagining it from the receiving end, sitting miles away, watching those signals come in, reading in real time about a battle you cannot stop and men you cannot save, the mirror still flashing as the sounds of fighting get closer to the signalman with every message. When the building was nearly gone and he was the last man left, Gurmukh Singh contacted Fort Lockhart one final time and asked for permission to leave the heliograph and take up his rifle. His commanding officer granted it. He put down the mirror, picked up his weapon, and held the doorway alone until he was killed. The British Indian government awarded all 21 soldiers the Indian Order of Merit, the highest gallantry decoration available to Indian soldiers at the time, and it remains to this day the only instance in which that award was given posthumously to every member of an entire unit at once. The story was taught at military academies across Europe as a case study in defensive tactics, in the use of terrain, in what a small and determined force can extract from a larger one when the conditions are right and the will is absolute. In the Sikh community, September 12th is still observed as Saragarhi Day, with ceremonies and commemorations that have continued unbroken for over a century, because the story belongs to that tradition in a way that goes deeper than military history. These were men acting out something their culture had always said was possible, and they proved it in a way that left no room for doubt. But the thing that actually stays with you when you spend time with this story, rather than just skimming the facts, is not the tactics or the casualties or the awards that came afterward. It's Gurmukh Singh at the heliograph, spending 7 hours watching everything happen, relaying every signal, keeping his post while everyone around him died, and then, when there was nothing left to relay, when he was the only one, asking not for rescue, not for orders to withdraw, but for permission to go out and join his regiment in whatever came next. He knew exactly what was outside that door. He had been watching it arrive for 7 hours, and he asked to go toward it anyway, not because he thought it would change the outcome, but because he was the last one standing, and the last one doesn't get to be the one who leaves. That feeling, that specific, irrational, completely human refusal, is the thing that connects this ridge in the mountains to every other story like it across history, from the pass at Thermopylae to the farmhouse at Cameroon to 100 other places where the numbers were impossible and people stayed anyway. It is never really about the cause, or the orders, or the flag, or any of the large abstract things we use to explain these moments after the fact. It is always, underneath all of that, about the people standing next to you, about the fact that you have watched them, and they have watched you, and that after enough of that, leaving is simply no longer a thought your mind is capable of completing.
21 men held a mirror and a wall on a ridge in the mountains, and 10,000 could not move them.